Coming up this week on the Digital Lifestyle Show 903, Gary's here, and we've got lots to talk about. We're catching up on some of the EV news this week, as well as changing in battery technology and some interesting stuff, things like smart homes and phones and things like that with the smart batteries. We'll also be talking about using a smart home, how you can use that to control the heat in your house with the hot weather that we're having at the moment here in the UK, and why smart home's important for that. We've got new builds of Windows 11 to talk about, some more vintage music kits, and Gary's got some of that, and I've got a drum machine and lots more. So let's get straight to Gary. Gary, good evening.
Good evening.
And it's just us tonight because Richard, I think he's on his way back from France, isn't he? Having cycled immense distance.
Cycled to France. Very impressive, I have to say.
Yeah, that is really impressive. So we'll find out how he got on next week. But I know he made it. So
and I don't think he used any technology to get there. I don't think he was using an e-bike or anything like that. It was his own pedal power. So yeah,
it's all Richard power. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's certainly, and we're hopefully your smart automation and my smart automation is trying to help keep our houses cool, because yes, us Brits love talking about the weather, but this is hotter than we are used to. We're used to cold, damp drizzle. We're not used to 40 degrees weather, 30 degrees weather.
Yeah. It's still what's 27 degrees on the front door of the studio. So
yeah.
So
I know you've been working on it. I've been so I've got the greenhouse sensor, so that's on my SwitchBot. So currently it's showing it's 25.7. They've updated the app actually. I don't know if you've seen the new app. It's quite easy to use, quite clear, and it's a really nice tool to be able to track it. But and then because it's got historical data, you can compare it with last year. So I can see it's almost 10 degrees warmer than it was this time last year. So you can see I can track it for, that's over the last year. You can see it. So we had that's the last month that it's showing there. So we started the month on averaging 20 degrees, and we're up to the 40s. But what's been interesting is the low temperature is steadily increasing, showing, so the overnight temperature. In fact, last night it was 18 degrees or something like that overnight, whereas at the beginning of May it was 4 degrees. So, and then you can see the humidity is really dropping as well. So, yeah, it's quite interesting tracking that. I don't know, have you been able to use some of your things to keep you cool? Keep you cool?
Yeah, you can probably see a little bit darker there, and that's because I've got the blinds are now. I already had the blinds set so they automatically came down enough to block sunlight from getting in my eyes. But obviously, one of the best ways you can keep an enclosure cool is to put the blinds down to stop the sun coming in. This room's really well insulated, so if it doesn't get the heat up in it, it's not going to get too hot. It stays whatever temperature you heat it to, basically. So I've set it so now if the temperature's over a certain limit and the sun's in the right direction, the blinds will come down automatically and shade that part of the building. So as the sun travels over, I get light from one end or the other end of the building. So to do that, and it also will tell me which door to open if I want to actually cool it down. So it checks the interior temperature, and it's difficult for me to keep it totally cool in here because though it's fairly passive in its temperature, I've got a lot of computer here, and that warms up any space. So it gets to a certain threshold and it says open the front door or open the back door, depending where the sun is. So it knows where the sun's travelled to, and it will actually tell me that it's better to open the front door than it is to open the back door. And at noon it says don't open any doors because it's off both sides. It's not going to cool you down. But yeah, it's quite good. And the next thing I might do is actually put some temperature sensors outside and get a better idea where those. Although I get a fairly good idea from my temperature sensor actually on the door frame. Which is quite interesting because that picks up the heat of the door, which is obviously getting heated from the outside as well as the inside. So you get a fairly good idea of shaded temperature. It's fairly accurate for a shaded temperature. So yeah, it's quite useful. I do like those multi-sensors. I've got a couple of smart things multi-sensors which do contact. So basically, if the door's open or shut, temperature, humidity, and also vibration, which is really good. And a very sensitive vibration. Had a a squirrel come to the door earlier and just sort of rub its nose against the door, and it detected the vibration of that. So that's quite good. So you can do automations based on that. So one of the things I have is during the day the blind on the front door will come down if someone's outside to try and protect it. But I still want to know if anybody's at the door and be able to see them. So if someone knocks on the door, the blind will automatically open.
Yeah, that's quite a good idea. Yeah,
And at night it doesn't. So security wise, it won't do it at night. But during the day, it just brings the blind up. It's a little bit slow. I wish the IKEA blinds were a bit quicker. I can't think of a way of actually making them any quicker because it's not easily hackable. But it would be nice to be able to sort of get that to rise a little bit quicker. But it still works. I
you need that. Yeah, you've got a camera, but you can get that glass, can't you? That electrostatic glass.
Yeah,
so that
that's something I keep thinking about when we go for something like that at some point, just to have it change. That'd be a nice picture.
But yeah, that's quite expensive for what you're gaining from that. I don't know how many times people come knocking on your door. Yeah,
it's about £400-500 there I'm looking at, so it's not a cheap option. I mean, blinds aren't actually they're about £100, but they're still cheaper than that. So and I like the IKEA blinds. The batteries last a really long time on these. They're so easy to fit as well. So and I've managed to get them linked into smart things. So although they've got their own IKEA system, tractory system for control, it's just Zigbee, and SmartThings works with Zigbee. So that's what I've done. I've used the Zigbee pairing, to a little bit of pairing, but it works fine, and that means I can integrate it into everything else. So, as I say, I can do things like when the sun's in a certain position, close them down, or watch the temperature, watch the sun position. And it's useful to do that, and actually it comes into that intelligent home thing. I don't have to think about it; it just does it for me, and it does it. And it's doing. I mean, I particularly like the blinds coming down to block the sunlight coming in when it's not too hot outside, and I want the sun on coming in, but I don't want to be blinded by it, especially that low winter sun in the afternoon when it's really straight in your eyes. And it just knows it's going to be there, and it just stops the blind just enough to block it while still giving enough light to come in. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, I've had the I've got the Hive set up to give me notifications on low temperatures and high temperatures. It doesn't do anything, but it sends me an email to say, your home's above 25 degrees. But then it's not linked to anything. But I like to know. But there's not much you can do about that.
It's also interesting all the sensors I've got in here, because I've got quite a lot of temperature sensors as well, so I can actually sort of see where the heat is. And I know it's kind of there. That's where the warmth is at the moment, and it's gradually rising. But at the moment, the ceiling's actually significantly cooler than the rest of the building, which is unusual because you expect heat to rise, but it's only 13 degrees at the ceiling and 15.4 degrees at the floor, which proves I've kept it really cool in here. As well, so because the outside temperature is about 27 at the moment still, so it's definitely kept it cooler, which is good. I mean, it's good. I mean, it's social things you can do. I mean, I won't be using this thing for a few weeks, I don't think.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, although with the British weather, you never know. It could be July. You'll be using it.
It's suddenly freezing again, but not from the looks of things anyway.
No, definitely not. No, but it is that this is probably where, with climate change, where the intelligent home things can be useful, because we're having to adapt to there's no point in fighting climate change. It's adapt to it, isn't it, and use the technology to help you adapt to it. We're getting colder winters and more random weather, and I know even we've had no rain here at all, but even 5 miles away or 10 miles away it is to Wigan, they've had torrential flooding last night, but nothing here at all. So it's we have to get used to these kind of different weather patterns.
We do.
And smart homes.
I think actually I'm not sure if I can find the map to it again, but I found a really useful site the other day, which actually shows where lightning's falling or hitting in the UK.
Oh, that's quite handy. Yeah. I remember as a kid, it was always turn the telly off, which I'm not sure that I think you had to really unplug it from to avoid a lightning strike damage, you'd have to unplug it and plug it from the aerial. But I'm not sure what turning it off actually did. But I do remember being told to do that. When turn the lights off, turn the telly off.
Yeah, because there's a new lightning detection system called Leela. I don't actually know what that stands for, but it seems to be very effective. Let's see if I can share this link with you. But yeah, it definitely the other day when we actually did have lightning here, it was showing the strikes on the map almost immediately they actually occurred, which is quite impressive.
Oh yeah, let's have a look at that. And I've switched to using the old version of Teams, and so I can do the things like sharing the screen again, which was always a bit of. Oh yeah, you can see there you go. In Scotland, it's got a bit of lightning now. So yesterday that would have been absolutely all lit up around the north of England. I'll scroll down. Yeah. So when we had the thunderstorms yesterday, it would have all been lit up around Manchester, but not where I am, which is unfortunate because my garden could do with a bit of water. I tell you what, they would like this. Some of the and these are probably the kind of technologies used, but the Formula One and the other sports, any sports really, where they can use this prediction. I know in the F1 they always say rain's falling at turn 3 in 3 minutes, and they're using this kind of data, aren't they? To predict the upcoming weather. It was at the weekend. It was the Le Mans 24 Hours, which I should have gone to. I was almost booked it and then ended up not doing it, but it ended up being a really good weekend and a good race. But I did watch it on TV. But Ferrari won, but not electric cars, but hybrid. A lot of hybrid technology, different versions of hybrid technology, and they're on about using. I think it's next year. There's got an experimental car in the field to do it, which is hydrogen powered.
Yeah.
And I think they're looking at other technologies, but they were saying they're using sustainable fuel now. So it's based off grape peelings or the skins of grapes or something like that. They make this make the fuel. It's a
biofuels.
Yeah, which I thought, considering Le Mans race is French, I thought using the waste product of winemaking seems perfect.
And I like those sort of things, and it does show that you can have some form of internal combustion and for specific stuff. I mean, you wouldn't be able to do that for public carrying of vehicles all around the world, and that's not practical. But for stuff where it's a hobby or for racing or stuff like that, you can certainly see Formula One using some form of fuel like that.
Well, I think they've said they're moving to that as well, aren't they?
They talk about e-fuels as well, and I'm not a great fan of e-fuels. There's a really good video explaining why e-fuels just aren't going to work in a practical manner for Joe public, because it's just going to be too expensive. I mean, the fuel density of e-fuels is really poor at the moment, and production costs are quite high. And even if they get them down to the cost they're sort of talking about, which is kind of what they're saying, $3 a litre doesn't give you very much mileage at all on e-fuel at the moment. I mean, it's clever stuff. It's carbon capture and stuff like that, but it still emits pollution when it comes out. It's not quite it's not carbon the climate change like the pollution, but it's still fumes which will affect your health. So it's still not good that they do that. But I can see where e-fuels may have a purpose on stuff like motor racing and stuff, because you could actually have a little plant to produce the e-fuel actually on site, and solar panels to do it and stuff like that. I mean, it's certainly not a sufficient way of producing energy. It takes a lot more energy to produce an e-fuel than it does to power an EV battery, for example. But and it's the same problem with hydrogen. Hydrogen is not a dense fuel. I mean, yes, you could use hydrogen in fuel cells, and your output through water and all that. But actually, producing hydrogen takes a lot of electricity, far more than again producing EVs, and transporting it is a nightmare. I mean, if we were being powered by hydrogen when we had the fuel strike a year back now, I guess, we would have needed, I think it's something like 8 to 10 times more petrol tankers or more tankers to transport the hydrogen. And that's not even taking into account the fact that it'd have to be pressurized and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think hydrogen for passenger cars is probably a pipe dream. I don't think we can get there. I think there are some cases where you can see it has the potential. Trains may be an idea where you could actually have a lot of hydrogen stored in a train fairly easily. Have a hydrogen plant at each end of the line to fuel it. That's a possibility. Although trains are pretty good at being powered by electricity already.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, that did kind of work quite well with electricity.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting. It's trying to find where that is. I think hydrogen doesn't really work as a mass fuel for even things like aircraft because of the fuel density. You still need a lot of and pressurization, and they become very difficult. As my dad would have said, have they forgotten the Hindenburg?
Yes.
Anytime I talk about hydrogen powering anything. But yeah, it's interesting that all this. I mean, I think there will be alternatives to just pure battery electric vehicles. I think, and also, I mean, there's been quite a bit of talk about range and density, battery densities the last few weeks, and I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where solid state batteries actually become a real thing, but if they do, you'll have cars with 800 or 900 mile range quite easily. They're fairly lightweight. All this weight issues go away. I know we've seen a resurgence of the comments about parking lots recently. I saw.
Yes, I've seen that. Yeah.
Which is weird. I mean, yes, battery electric vehicles are heavier than the equivalent size vehicle, the petrol at the moment, although that will change. But they're not the heaviest vehicles out there. I mean, most of the really heavy vehicles, which are currently parking in parking lots, are not battery electric vehicles. I think there is a case actually to be had for banning all heavy vehicles off certain floors of old parking lots. So I'm not saying there's actually no sense to this article, but there are certain parking structures built in the 50s where, unless there's extensive maintenance, the top floors are susceptible to heavyweight vehicles. You wouldn't want to park trucks up there, for example. Why would you park a heavy Range Rover, for example, at the top, or any of the massive SUVs would go there? And cars have got heavier. I mean, there's always people moaning about how cars are bigger now and everything, but the part of that is the safety features. Cars have got wider because we've added at least an inch width to every single vehicle because of the panels, the spacing. We have to have air spacing for collision damage. Even to get sort of 1 or 2 star safety ratings, you have to have, and to start getting the higher versions where you have to have side curtains and all that sort of stuff, you need substantial extra width on vehicles. So we now have cars which are way wider and bigger than they were for less space inside. Except for the EVs, where you get slightly more space inside because of the length of them internally is more than the equivalent of petrol car. But yeah, it's and we haven't changed the regs. I mean, our parking regs, the planning regs for parking date back to the 50s and 60s.
Hillman Imps and original minis.
And even sort of large cars then for Cortinas and things were actually quite narrow if you actually looked at them in today's terms. And so we have parking spaces which aren't fit for purpose now, and we're still building them. It's kind of crazy, but we haven't got that much land, so in some ways we have to have. If you want people parked to your shops or your cafe or whatever, you want small narrow car park spaces. Maybe automation is the answer to that. Actually, the self parking things that actually improved. I mean, self parking has never been a particularly good technology until fairly recently. There's some definite improvements coming on that where it gets faster. Because one of the big problems with most of the automated parking systems is they're really slow because they're over cautious about what they're doing. And I've seen some faster moving ones now which actually can work and work as quickly as humans can parking. So that may be a better approach. And I do like the remote control of my car. That's been incredibly useful. A few times when we're parked too close to get the back doors open to get the girls in and out of the car, it's just press the button, remote control it, and pull it forward out of the space. So I can get them in and get back in, whatever. Obviously, you end up blocking the car park for a few seconds while you do that, but sometimes the only way. But, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is the technology has improved, but like you said, we haven't really caught up on some of the other regulations, and it's not just it's not to do with EVs, just cars in general are bigger, aren't they? And I still can't understand. I see some of these big, not particularly EVs, but just big SUVs, and you do think, well, why do you need one of them? Is there a good reason? And I know some people like them because they sit high and that kind of thing, but I prefer a smaller car, a bit more nimble and agile myself. But that's the one thing, when I'm looking at changing cars, perhaps next year, is if I ever looked at an EV, I don't want a big massive SUV. I still want a smaller, nimble car. But so it's and that there are a few out there though. So there are some options,
and get more as well. There's a lot of the Chinese manufacturers are starting to bring a lot more smaller cars in. We talked about the BYD one I saw. There's a few other manufacturers starting to come to market and do that, and hopefully we'll start seeing some of the traditional manufacturers doing it as well. I mean, although Volvo are technically a Chinese company now because they're owned by Geely, but their new small, which is a kind of SUV shape, but it's a much smaller car. It's a really nice EV, quite long range, and you are starting to use some of these lighter battery packs. And there's a load of new technology on battery pack. Battery technology has been promising the earth for ages and hasn't delivered. But I think we are going to start seeing some of the delivery in the next few months from some different technologies. I don't know if solid state will make it. Toyota have basically gone for they brought up virtually all the decent solid state in the battery manufacturers. So if it succeeds, that will put Toyota ahead of the game on terms of range and that, but they've been saying it's coming soon for years. They had another press release this year saying in 2 years' time we'll have a 900-mile range car, but they said that 2 years ago as well. So it's something very similar 2 years ago. So it's not it's difficult to see where that is because they haven't got a commercialized system for solid state. Where we will see solid state batteries and soon is in phones. And that will be a big difference. I mean, there's two real solid advantages of solid state. Obviously, they're less likely to catch fire because they don't have potential issues, and they don't have a lot of the other problems which normal actually had. They're also a lot cooler, so they don't run hot, so they don't lose energy through heating up. And they're faster to charge, significantly faster to charge. So you potentially could get a 5, 6, 7 day life battery in a phone, which would be much smaller, lighter, and charging almost in 10-15 minutes. So that's the sort of thing. That's the sort of thing it brings to the market. But the other kind of advantage of solid state, which can also be done with other technologies, is what they call structural batteries, where you don't actually have battery packs, but they become part of the vehicle. Does make it more difficult to replace them, but some of these batteries will have very, very long lives, so you wouldn't necessarily need to replace them. But solid state batteries have the potential to be built into the bodywork of the vehicle, and you could actually make the whole car be one giant battery, with no real impact, fire risk, or anything like that, because just the way the technology works. And then you could potentially have a car which, because energy densities are could go potentially through the roof on this. The predictions are that you could get 100 times the current energy density with certain types of battery technology. Again, bit of a pipe dream at the moment. We haven't seen this for reality, but we are seeing it on a very small scale. And if that happens, you build the whole car out of the battery, which is a lot more battery than you currently have anyway. You could be talking 20,000-30,000 mile range cars on a single charge. You buy the car fully charged and you give it back once it's uncharged, and they recharge it for 7 weeks.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Yeah,
because you wouldn't be able to fast charge something like that. I mean, you could fast charge something like that, but you need a 7 megawatts connector.
Yeah.
So yeah, you wouldn't. That's not going to happen.
It's a different, but it offers a different way of thinking, isn't it? And that removes the charging infrastructure issues. If you've got that kind of range,
And actually, I think this is one of the reasons why we're struggling to get charging infrastructure out there at the moment, because it's not a long-term investment if you start looking at the potential for long-term range cars, because those people who can charge at home and have a very long range car will not be charging on the road.
Mm.
And I think that's why we're seeing a lot more investment in charging within cities rather than actually on the road, rather than the service stations and services where people want it now. But in cities, you can see there is a long-term role for charging for people who haven't got home charging and would want to charge locally. So yeah, I kind of see that, but it is a difficult one. Do you invest now and then in 5 years' time the battery technology is such that nobody's charging at your chargers? It's a little bit challenging.
Yeah. It's
And it's fair
never
to say we
moving.
haven't got enough charges on the services at the moment, but that's a difficult one to balance.
Yeah, but and I suppose you're right though, because it's an ever changing field. It's like with consumer technology, we went through a rapid phase, say going from vinyl records to the where we are with streaming. There's a relatively short period of time we saw each technology innovation, vinyls, then CDs and mini discs and DVDs and Blu-rays and super audio CDs and all these things. Each window got shorter and shorter, didn't it, until we ended up where we are now. And I suppose that's the same thing that can happen with car tech.
Yeah, and you can see it happening. I mean, there's a massive change which has happened in America in the last couple of weeks. So General Motors and Ford have both decided they're going to adopt what's called the North American Charging Standard, which is basically Tesla's charging standard. So they're going to use Tesla's connector, Tesla's charging thing, which is on the superchargers out there. So that's a single connector, not the CCS connector they've been using up to now. So that's basically been abandoned in America. And there's very few companies in America who will not be using NACS. And you can see it now that once the big three go over to it, every charger is going to have NACS on it, and it's going to be the way to do it. And NACS is a really nice connector. It's a really small connector. It's very neat. It's a lot lighter to use. It is limited in the amount of charge it can give, so that has some limitations. The CCS can give a much higher charge rate for higher capacity in the future, but you can certainly see that's the way it's gone. And that's a change which is happening almost overnight. Suddenly it's announced that that's going on, and then all the charging manufacturers are saying, look, we're now going to put NACS on our chargers, probably at the cost of CHAdeMO no longer being on their chargers. And it's really a sea change, that. But it also means that in America, every car manufactured by GM, by Ford, will be able to take advantage of Tesla's very well built up supercharging network, which suddenly makes EV driving a lot more pleasant experience in America, because the other charging networks in America have not been good so far. So yeah, it's a very, very interesting move. And in some ways, I wish that move had happened earlier. Because the Tesla connector is a really nice connector and a lot easier for people to understand, because you just plug in and it charges and you get charged in their account. You don't have to worry about any contacts or anything like that. It just works. But we've got CCS now, and CCS is future proof. I mean, that's the one thing. When we start going up to megawatts charging, we can still get to some extent with CCS. Once we get these bigger range cars, we're going to need faster charging. So that's one aspect of it. I mean, that's one of the disadvantages of these really big charging cars. If you want to go a whole day charge it at home, it's going to take you 2 or 3 days to charge it up to get your 900 range or whatever on a slow charger, because most of our home chargers can only ever get us up to 7 kilowatt, and if you've got a 120 kilowatt hour battery, you're still talking a few hours to get that charged.
Yeah, it's just constantly changing. I suppose that's what makes it interesting as well. And then for potential buyers like me, I suppose it's just a question of what point you're buying them. What technology?
But I think it's like computers. I think it's like any technology. I mean, we always say this when people ask us when's the right time to buy a laptop or a computer. It's now. It's always now. You can wait for you can always have bread tomorrow, but you might as well have some cake now and actually eat it for a while. But certainly the case, you might as well get a few years out of it. I mean, it is the reason I think why second-hand prices of EVs, aside from the lack of demand as well, but I think there's been a bit of a correction on second-hand EV costs, because there is a worry about the technology moving on really quickly. And people, I actually think that's less. They should be less worried about that than they are. I mean, I actually quite like the fact that there are some pretty cheap EVs out there now, because it means the people who are on the second-hand market might actually be able to afford an EV now, rather than being forced to buy petrol diesel because that's all they can actually afford. Yeah, so it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing, and hopefully, I think next year when I look at some of these different ways of purchasing, different systems, and I'll be able to get your input on that one. And moving on to some of our regular things, we got some builds last week, didn't we? Not huge, not a huge amount of builds, but we did get some builds. So let's have a look at those. So we got 2, 3, 4, 7, 5, and I think we got 2, 3, 2, 5, 3, 8, 1. But I think there wasn't very much details on these for in terms of release notes. We had the SMB change, and I think that was it really for the Canary channel. We're still not seeing many changes on the Canary channel, but things are a bit more interesting on the dev channel. So I don't think you've got a chance to see the new file explorer. It's had the address bar moved up a bit, up to the top level, which is this new modern. And this they mentioned this a few times, but it's using the Windows. Let's see what they say. Yeah, Windows App SDK. What's the Windows App SDK?
It's the Windows App SDK. You know, it's literally an SDK for doing Windows apps, but it's part of WinUI and all the latest stuff. It's basically a common set of UXy tools. Which
so any developer can use this kind of.
Yeah.
So it's not Win32. It's a .NET type environment.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I mean it's part of the WinUI, which is it's a different environment. I mean, UI apps are kind of can be UWP or Windows Desktop. So it's a way of doing a lot of stuff in an easy way.
Yeah, I think I quite like the visual changes. I think they look quite nice. I haven't gotten, as usual, they're doing the A/B testing, so I haven't had the new address bar yet to give this a try. But I have got the gallery view now, where you go into that and you see your farms. Something else that's in here, which I did want to mention to you, which does sound interesting, is dynamic lighting and the APIs for OEMs to use these dynamic lighting APIs with the RGB devices, including the light panel that I've got, the twinkly light panel. But I think it's designed for like keyboards, isn't it? And keyboards are nice with RGBs, or your fan with your RGB, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it is.
But I can see some interesting things, especially with Windows, and we've taught notifications and things like that with Teams, with third-party apps. But that light panel that I've got just above me there, that would be great if that was hooked up to Windows, so that it could show me incoming Teams calls or statuses and things like that. So you can have my normal decorations on there, but it's linked to the Windows API as well. So Windows can tell it to do things. But I think it's more designed around the hardware, isn't it? So if you buy all these things you can get, like I've got a microphone with I'm not using it now, but this microphone here has got RGB on it, and it's just RGB in colours, and there's an app to control it, but it's not linked to anything. But I think this is all about bringing that into Windows, isn't it? And being controlled from Windows.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
And there's a huge list of keyboards.
Yeah, they've already got quite a good take up of this, I have to say. It looks really interesting. And it's his as well. So it's human interface device layer. So it's all really integrated into the OS. It's nice to see.
So I think it would need, like I said, just mentioned Twinkly part with it, but I think you would need a Windows Twinkly app that it would then hook up to, rather than just the sort of the Android app. But anyway, that's good to see. So hopefully I'll get to have a play with that and get to see that in future. And there were a few other fixes, the usual fixes. Some issues with dev drive. I've still not tried that yet. I don't want to eat up all the disk space on my Surface here to do that. I've already got about 10 virtual machines to try and all these restores and backups and things. But yeah, so these builds are quite interesting, and these are, as my guess is, these are 23H2 So later on this year, we'll see those as the next update to Windows 11. What the Canary channel's for, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe there's some exciting stuff coming out in there, but nothing that I've seen so far. And I think we also did get a bit update to the beta build, but there was just some additional languages for narrator, and that was it on there. And yesterday we also got an update for the subsystem for Android. It enables file sharing as well, so you can share files, which is quite handy really, because I use that quite often in Android. So if you take a photo, you can share it to whichever, Twitter or Instagram or whatever. You just use the share, and that's now built into the subsystem as well. So they're still doing a lot of development. I know we talked about who's using this, but they're definitely still doing a lot of work on this. So it's got to be part of a bigger plan, I think, of maybe something for the next version of Windows is part Android. Who knows? But they're certainly doing a lot of work on this, and it is quite a good system now. And I do use it for, if I want to check my Arlo cameras, I tend to use it rather than going to the phone. I tend to use it on my Surface using the Android app rather than the browser. It's a bit more full featured, but now I've got that sharing. It would mean that if I've got a video clip in Android, I can share that directly to another app. So yeah, it's quite good that they're working on that.
Yeah, very useful. I'm using it more to be honest, on some of the smartphone stuff and keeping it on running on the system.
It gives you that option, doesn't it? So
yeah,
I think it's just the only one thing it's missing is the Google apps, Google Play Store. If they got that on it, then it's definitely a full parity with an Android phone. Without that, you've got to have a bit of tech savvy to be able to get the APKs and install those, or get them from the Amazon store, which is a little bit limited. Whether that's in the works, I don't know. It requires some working together between Google and Microsoft. Something not all they've always been very good at doing together, mainly on Google's side, I think, thinking back to Windows Phone days. But these relationships ebb and flow, don't they, and changing it. Sometimes some companies work together very well, and then they don't. They're sworn enemies, and then they suddenly find themselves in an alliance. So who knows whether we'll ever get that in here? I doubt it, because it's almost like a competitive advantage, isn't it, for Chrome OS and Android tablets? But who knows? These. I think it's usually when there's some other third party that they both, say Microsoft and Google, were worried about, then you would see it. You would see it in both their interests to work together.
Indeed. Well, actually, we missed something on the Apple launch last week. I was meant to mention it. This new nightstand mode seems to be getting a lot of excitement in the smart home industry. The idea that you can basically put your phone on stand, and it becomes kind of like a equivalent to an Amazon Echo type device.
Oh, yeah.
And I've certainly seen a lot of people stateside, because obviously market penetration by Apple is much higher in the States, saying that this may have a real impact on Amazon sales, because it's one of the prime uses of Echo devices, or at least the Echo Show type devices.
Yeah.
So it's certainly interesting to see that option, which I hadn't spotted before. And obviously with the Apple's home infrastructure for smart home control becoming more commonly used, and also being part of Matter, which is the sort of the catch-all smart home system service, which is more and more people are adopting. That actually allows you to control your smart home from something on the stand as well. So you could potentially have an old iPhone for that, or an old iPad for that type of control. So it certainly seems to be getting a lot of interest in the smart home world.
I think because that's what I used to, not on this phone, but I tended to do with, I think it was when I had my Pixel, I used to have it on a dock in that sort of night mode. I didn't use it as obviously for smart home, but it had the clock on there and the alarm. But then since getting the the Echo Show that I use now as my clock radio, effectively. So that's my alarm clock, and it's sort of the clock at night and things. So the phone is on the table next to it. But yes, I think it is a good idea. You've kind of got that screen doing nothing at night while you're charging up, so it does make sense to utilize that. I think the Lumia was actually quite good at that because it had the always on screen.
The always screen was excellent for that, doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's where I actually started off using it with a dock. Then, rather than just plugging it in, I actually plugged it in so we could see it. And I think it was the Lumia that I first started doing that with. But yeah, it does make sense. I've got an issue with this warm weather. My Echo Show in the kitchen, it's on a east-facing window, and it's on the windowsill. And this time of year, especially in the morning, as the sun goes on the back of it, it gets really hot and shuts itself down. So I've had to move it off the windowsill, but it was quite handy there because it was at a good location. It was kind of up there, out of the way, but the sun on the back of it, it just turns itself off. I guess it's got a thermal cutoff in there that it's picking it up. It's not like it's crashed. It just shuts itself down. So, like with your phone, I think there's a thermal cutoff on it, and it's. But I think it's the black back of it just absorbs the morning sun and shuts down. And once you get past sort of 12 o'clock lunchtime, the sun's moved around and it's fine. It doesn't do it again. But so I've had to move that. But yeah, I think the black back and the fact it's probably because it's got an Intel chip in it as well. It runs quite warm anyway. But yeah, I think if it was white, it would probably be okay. But I suppose it's a good thing that it's got the thermal sensor in there and just doesn't melt and damage it. So it does shut it down. I did videos of those two builds as well, so you can take a look at that. I have got another video that I've done this week on a slightly different topic, and that is of another one of my it's a retro kit, especially one for us oldies. This is a video I've done of the Yamaha RX5 drum machine, which is actually quite a beast of a machine. I don't think from the picture you doesn't really realize how big it is. But when you see, there's a picture of me holding it there, you can see it's actually a really big unit. But this is a machine I've had more than 10 years. When these were really cheap to buy, they're actually quite expensive now. So this is the RX5, came out in 1986 for about $1,100. And in many ways was a peak 80s drum machine. It's not got the classic sounds of a Roland 808 or 909 that you hear on dance music still. But it does have that solid 80s feel. But I think it was just the complexity of it, just before you really went to computer-based drum programming. So it was kind of the peak of the standalone machines before. I mean, there are some great drum machines out there now, but this was meant as a drummer replacement machine in the 80s. And yeah, it's got some nice effects on it. You can do individual pitch shifts and all sorts of stuff to it, envelopes, and so I managed to go through some of the features on there. So yeah, it's quite a nice machine, so very 80s sounding. And if you go onto my YouTube channel, I've done a little demo song of it as well. So if you don't want to listen to my my full explanation, you can watch a little video of it. Which I'll skip the ads. Yeah, which I don't think you can hear through this, but I'll drop the song in at the end of the show anyway. So yeah, this was made with the TX7. So I used the 80s drum machine, 80s synth as well, with a couple more modern ones in there. But it's got that very 80s sound. Quite enjoyed doing that one. And as I mentioned a few weeks ago, doing these videos of existing kit that I've got, especially some stuff I've had for a while, it's actually a great way of remembering why you like the machine to start off, and actually using it properly, rather than it just sat on a shelf at the back of me like it normally does. I've actually really spent some time with it, and I thought I'm actually going to use this a bit more. So it's a good way of getting more out of your kit, actually, is to spend some time with it.
Well, I spent last night stripping this down, so it's because the couple of pots on it had gone and the thing. So yeah, this is a
Oh, what's
Casio
that? So,
PC 200. So it's not Roland PCT. I think it was Casio Roland PC 200.
it's a controller
Keyboard.
keyboard, is it?
Controller keyboard, yeah. One of the classic 80s controller keyboards, basically. I think every aspiring keyboardist at the time had one of these plugging into the MIDI. It's a MIDI controller, basically.
Yes, it is.
It's
Yeah.
got it's got it's got a modulation key. It's got a nice data entry slider. I don't know if you see that data
Oh,
entry
yeah.
slider. A couple of buttons. and
That
things
would
to
have been
do.
used with your Roland MT32.
Well, yeah, and the couple of other things I had as well sitting around. So, but yeah, it's used. It was part. It's my It's the only thing I've ever used to compose music when I used on a German TV series. So there. But yeah, it's been installed for a little while, so it's a bit worse for wear. But I was taking apart, and I've got most of the keys now working, so I'm just trying to work out.
This is definitely your friend on anything like that.
Oh yeah.
This service hub, absolutely brilliant for stuff like that. In fact, one of the Roland buttons, the Yamaha buttons, wasn't working properly. I was going to strip it down. I thought before I do that, I'll give it a good old spray, and that did cure it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one thing I really quite like about this, I don't know if you can see, but you notice that across the top of the keyboard, you've actually got control commands. So the keyboard itself becomes the controller for itself.
Right. Yeah. So I think if I remember rightly, this late 80s, I'll look it up actually, but late 80s, and it was designed to control with the MT32, which was a standalone module, multi-timbral module where you could have drums and things like that, and it actually became the standard for general MIDI. That's still on your Windows PC. That you've got a general MIDI sound card on your PC, and the patches are in the order of the MT32, and that's it. All sort of came from that time.
Yeah, it's really good. I also quite like the fact that it's got octave shift buttons on it as well. So if you're really good, you can do one-handed play and just octave shifts.
Yes, that's exactly the mod wave I've got here. Has got the 4-octave keyboard, and I use it's got the octave buttons on there. I do use those to flick up and down without having to go around.
Well, gets me though is how heavy it is. It's really weighty compared to modern keyboards.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's that the drum machine, the Roland one, in the video, it weighs way more than any of the other synths that I've got here, modern ones like the Mod Wave. I mean, this is the Mod Wave, and I can probably carry this on one hand. It's basically plastic. That thing is half the size, but it's absolute tank. But I think it could be run over by a tank, and you'd still Now your PC 200 was first released in 1986.
Yeah, it's a beast.
Yeah, and it was designed to use with MIDI controllers and PC. Oh well, it wasn't PCs. It would have been with your Atari probably in those days.
Oh yeah, it was. I definitely used this with my ST. This is a Mark 1. There was a Mark 2 as well, I believe. But it's quite good. I mean, what really impressed me is you can download the manual online still. Still keep the manual.
Actually, that was good with the Yamaha as well. Yamaha had the manual for the RX5 because I don't have a physical copy of the manual. So I was trying to work out how to do pitch editing on the drum sounds, and the manual's all there. Yeah, it's quite good actually. Some of the manufacturers do that. I think Korg have got some of their manuals. In fact, they've even got some of their service manuals for the early 80s and late 70s ones there. Not all the manufacturers do that, so it is quite good to be able to get us. But Roland are pretty good at supporting some of their older kit as well.
Yeah.
So you need to get that linked up to either an Atari ST or an MT32.
I'll see what I can come up with. I've got a few things. I was actually going to try it out with that piano module I had the other day.
Yes. It would also work with the D110 as well.
Yeah, it can probably work with D110 as well. Obviously I did use it with the D110 back in the day. But yeah, but I'm kind of keen to get it set up with I thought the piano module would be a good starting point for the girls to start learning piano potentially. over the years. But yeah, it's not bad. It's good. It's got a good feel, and of course it's velocity as well. So it's one of the early velocity sensitive keyboards. You do quite a bit with it.
Yeah, that's really good. I think it's always great when you get old technology like that that's still relevant, still works. The MIDI standard is still a thing, for despite being created in 1982 or 83, whatever it is. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Those things we talk about, technology changing in cars and things like that, but MIDI technology is definitely sticking around. I know there's a 2.0 on its way, but I don't. MIDI is still in use. Right, well, I think that's just about everything we've got time for this week. So, one other thing, there was a OneDrive outage. Did want to check with you. Were you affected by that?
I was, yeah. It was a very, very brief outage. It appears to have been a DDoS attack on Microsoft. They also had an outage on the Azure portal, which was probably more affecting to people in terms of businesses and things having problems with it. The OneDrive outage was early morning UK time and didn't really last very long. So I think most people probably passed most people by, but certainly it was out. You weren't able to access anything on OneDrive for a good half hour or so.
That's it. You stick everything in cloud, but then again, I was working with do some audit stuff the week, and I'm so glad I don't have an on-prem Exchange server. That's what I can say. Cloud hosted Exchange server is definitely a way of reducing your stress levels. As much as you get these incidents like that, I think patching an on-prem Exchange server with vulnerabilities now it's a real target, isn't it? And there's always something you hear about these 0-day vulnerabilities, not particularly for the Exchange or anything, but I think Rackspace had another issue as well last week or the week before. So I've had earlier issues a few months ago. So I'm glad I don't have to do those anymore. Right, well, anyway, that's just about all we've got time for this week. So where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Garry WMA and wherever else I happen to be hanging out. Can we find you on Blue Sky yet?
Yes, I'm on Blue Sky. I need to get back to it and actually set it up yet. I think the only person I follow on there is Richard, but I do need to go on there. One thing actually, a service I do find quite handy is Hyperfollow, which is from DistroKid. I used to host my Spotify music, but they do have this sort of thing where you can build up sort of shared links and things like that. And I think I can share this one. So this has got this Hyperfollow, so you can have one place where you can include lots of links for different things. So I think I'll just have to, you see, like with all these different things, so it's like one. I think actually it's a third-party service that you can sign up to, but DistroKid included. But so you can build up your own thing there. So I have a vague recollection of having something like this in the past, but anyway, so I'll have to have a Blue Sky icon onto it once I've worked out how to use it. It looks very much like Twitter to me. Have a look at that. And if you are I'll just go on to look at listen to me on Spotify or whatever, on all the music services now. I've got my new songs on there, The Observers. You can check that out, and also don't forget to check out the videos with the RX5 on. You can find me on Blue Sky at iStixon and Twitter as well. Right, well, I think that's just about everything for this week. So we'll be back same time, same place next week. Hopefully, Richard should be able to join us then. I'm off to Gardeners World Live this weekend. Wow. So you keep your tech shows, keep your CES, keep your Fully Charged Live. Gardeners World Live for me this weekend.
I enjoy it.
Yeah, see you next week.
Okay.